righty. Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another MSP Cyber Roundtable. Today, we're very excited to be welcoming Joseph Brunsman to have a conversation with us about lessons that other MSPs can learn from the $1 million lawsuit, which I imagine we'll dive into as well in some tertiary detail. Before we dive into the serious stuff, man, I want to ask you guys a couple of goofy questions if you're open to it.
I need one. I need three.
Let's do it.
I don't know if I got three for you, but I definitely give me your guys' favorite restaurant as a kid.
Oh, so if you had asked me like a couple of days ago, I wouldn't have known the answer. But I'm hearing this news coverage about how the animatronic like animals are being removed from Chuck E. Cheese, and they're talking about how like they're making jokes, they're cracking jokes about like the pizza that burns your mouth when it comes out of the oven. And I could just remember being that like 9-year-old kid that was so excited that I burnt my mouth on that pizza every freaking time. And I think that's it. I think it's Chuck E. Cheese.
Sure, that's a good one. What about you,
Man,
man?
I was
As a
also
kid,
going to
don't tell me steakhouse. I won't believe you if you tell me steakhouse.
I love steak.
I bet you do now, but I don't believe that's what it was as a kid.
No, actually, for me as a kid, just like Matt, it was Chuck E. Cheese. But
wow, we got a couple of gamers in here.
But my interest was actually in the animatronics, and so
they're killing it.
Which is sacrilegious because as a kid, I remember looking at these things, I'm like, how do these things actually work? And so even like as I was getting, I got my bachelor's in robotics, but like as I was getting my bachelor's, like I would often think back to my time as a kid at Chuck E. Cheese, right? Thinking about like, oh, that's why it was so like herky jerky, like the math and some of like the, electrical engineering and mechanical science behind it. I'm like, wow, they could really make those things awesome. Obviously they don't. Maybe that's like part of the appeal is this like just completely hokey type of experience, with like the herky jerky movements and all that stuff.
I heard an interview with the guy who built those things, and apparently to this day they're still running off 5.25-inch floppy disks, like this big, on like these ancient computers that are unfixable, and that's why they're killing them. But
that's too bad. That's too bad. I do love a Chuck E. Cheese. Charles Entertainment, man, I'm a big fan. When I grew up in St. Louis, we had an A&W root beer that I loved, and I saw recently that they're closing the rest of the A&Ws. So I'm going to say A&W, and then coming in at a quick second is Fudd Ruckers. Man, I love Fudd Ruckers so much. It's one of my favorites of all time. You guys ever been there?
Yeah, have you ever been to Schlotsky's Deli?
I've heard of it, but I've never been.
It's like, I mean, at least when I was a kid, I haven't been in probably 20 years, but they just had these sandwiches that were like bigger than my head.
Awesome.
I'm sure with inflation, they're like $45 sandwiches now, but
oh man,
they were good at the time.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background. Give the audience an idea of who you are. How did you get where you are now, and what are you doing?
So how did I get here? Dumb luck, circumstance, and pure nepotism is the short answer. So I'm a former IT, got my bachelor's in robotics, like I said, from the United States Naval Academy, master's in cybersecurity law. I've written, I believe, the best-selling book in the country on the topic of cyber insurance and cybersecurity law. And the whole path to me working with MSPs is when I left the Navy after 12 years. So I've worn a lot of hats, I guess you could say. I came into the insurance world. My father-in-law did insurance. So he's like, hey, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I was like, I don't really know. I'm just kind of, fun meter pegged in the Navy. And so he goes, hey, when I left the Navy, I did insurance. Why don't you come try it? If you hate it, no harm, no foul. Go use your GI Bill for whatever, right? Go to med school or whatever I wanted to do at the time. And so I started working with a bunch of financial services firms. And at the time, this was like 10 years ago. Cyber insurance was really new. I mean, there was no money in it. Nobody cared. I was writing articles on it. It was, chapters in my books at the time were written on this. Nobody cared. Everyone's like, hey, dude, you're wasting your time. And I'm like, yeah, but it's so interesting. And it kind of spoke to my technology background. And I'm like, hey, there's so much stuff here that like, it's just really interesting. So I just kept going down that path and ended up going to law school with my degree in a specialty in data privacy law. And then the way I started working with MSPs is I wrote my first book on cyber insurance and cybersecurity law. And I was like, yeah, I think this is really important that just people in technology understand this stuff. So I went to Reddit because I was like, I'll just give this away. I don't care. I put it on the InfoSec subreddit, got banned, I believe, for like a couple weeks. I don't remember why.
Because it was commercial or something, or
yeah, it wasn't even like, hey, give me your email address. I'm like, hey, here's where you download it. Like, I'm not going to email you. I don't care. I just think this is important to know.
They probably had they probably have some kind of privacy restriction around like sending people to downloadables or something. There's probably some kind of.
Yep.
They surely have liability there with so many. Anyway, I'm speculating, and I shouldn't.
Yeah. So, and then I put it on the MSP subreddit, and it just like exploded, and everyone's like, "Dude, this is awesome, thanks." And I'm like, "What do you guys actually do?" Because when I was
you'd have such a different response from a different subreddit.
Yeah, like it was, when I was in IT in the early 2000s, like MSPs didn't effectively exist, or at least they didn't exist in my neck of the woods. And so, it was probably more break fix stuff back then. Maybe there was some big MSP somewhere, but it never entered my world. And then I just started scrolling through the MSP subreddit, and I saw people asking questions and just getting some of the most awful advice. And I was like, no, you can't do that. Like, here's 50 reasons why. Yeah. And incidentally, at the time, I had started making YouTube videos because I was a new dad. And so it was, a toss up, if anybody here has kids, between getting, 3 hours of sleep and getting 7 hours of sleep. So it always it was a juggle. So I was like, oh, well, I'm going to take the common questions that people have, and I'm just going to make a video on them. So I can bring in kind of like the legal data privacy component, the insurance law side, and like the insurance agent side. And then that just kind of grew a life of its own. And now I've got almost 110 videos now. Really just to help MSPs. Like, they're all free. It's on my YouTube channel. Just YouTube my name. I got a ton of stuff on there. Should help you out.
What's been your favorite part of the journey?
Oh man, I don't have to sell
like your entire career journey, not just your relationship with MSPs, which I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about. And but as you relate to your getting to the point you are now, because you've built something that's impressive and valuable, and a lot of MSPs are looking to grow in that same way and are progressing towards that. What's been the most engaging moment for you? And it may be now, and that certainly is possible, but is there a moment that stands out other than now that you look back to and you say, man, there it was?
Man, when, a lot of what I did was just a labor of love for so long, because I just thought it was really interesting. And when I finally got to the point where I was like, man, I don't have to try to sell anything. Like, I can just help people and my business grows. And I'm like, I can teach people about this nerdy stuff that 5 years ago I couldn't even pay to get on stage, right? To talk about, what's additional named insured, primary non-contributory, waivers of subrogation, right? We were talking before we started here about like written notice of circumstance, the reasonableness standard in the law, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I couldn't pay people to listen to me talk about it. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, man, people not only want to know about this, but now people call me and they go, hey man, like, I watched your videos for like 2 years, right? I need help with X, Y, Z. And I'm like, cool, let me help you. Right? Like it's the coolest business to have where I'm like, dude, I don't convince anybody of anything. I don't need to do any of that. I'm just like, hey, here's what I know.
Yeah.
Go forth and
Here's where the
prosper.
value is.
Yeah.
It's the classic. It's a classic. Well, there the water is. Nobody has to drink it.
Yeah. And the scary / interesting part is that I've had the largest insurance brokerages in the country email me. And they're like, dude, loved your latest video. We watch your stuff for training, like for our own insurance guys. And I'm like, man, if you have a multi-billion-dollar insurance agency and you're watching my stuff, thank you.
Value there. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. That's a huge yeah, exactly.
I would have hoped they would have had their own training pipeline, but it just kind of goes to show you, like, there's just not a lot of information available.
And it's valuable to share it. And people want to share it. Or people want it to be
People
shared.
want to hear it.
Yeah.
And I love hearing that distinction between our InfoSec and our MSP, because this is not a Reddit thing, guys. Do you guys know that they make CISSP jokes, right? Like I got this credential, so you can see it. So anyway, the CISSP is like the guy with the huge head that like is totally impractical and like always gives like the stupidest answer that's non-technical. And like super infosec-y. But in any case, it's the infosec industry is full of dogma, and I had to go get this credential, and I had to swallow it all, right? And in the MSP industry, it is totally different. Rather than there being dogma where people who've sort of paid their dues and they're on top, and people have to like get their way there over 10 years or whatever, or 20 years. In the MSP ecosystem, everyone's just like, I don't know shit. And they're just swapping stories, and everyone admits they don't know anything, and they all share what they know, and everyone just like the whole industry is learning together, and it feels really different. And I'm sure when Joe jumps into that community and says, hey, I know this one thing really well, people are like, yes, please. So I can see it.
I love it.
Yeah. And like I hate the whole idea of tribal knowledge. Right. Because that's a lot of what the insurance industry is based on, is like, oh, well, this guy told me once. And, in my brain as a technical guy, I'm like, well, I don't care what somebody said. Like, what's the truth? Right. And it's something where, in the insurance industry, my certification came from, I had to learn about homeowners insurance and auto insurance. And like, I don't care. I don't read my own. Like everything I've done, I've written books on because they literally just did not exist. And it drives me nuts because I'm like, hey, what do I care about? The truth. Like that's what I care about. And like this whole idea of tribal knowledge.
Yeah, what's going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I've just been drilling down and down and down over a decade, just trying to figure out, all right, what's the truth here? Right? Like the best we can surmise. If it changes, if something changes, like I'll be the first one to put out a video to be like, I was wrong. This is different. This is how we, move forward with this new reality. But it's crazy that that type of information just doesn't exist in my side of the equation. So there's tons of insurance people just spouting complete and utter nonsense to folks because they're just not going to read, as we call it, like the tech pubs, right? Like they just don't read the technical information. And so it's just like this constant spouting of tribal knowledge, and it drives me nuts. Right. Or they're like, hey,
it's not good for the industry's growth. It sets people up to think they know and then fall in a hole, Yeah. It's like, man, I wish this map had those, this hole with spikes on it. Like I sure would have loved to have been able to walk around that bad boy if I'd have known it was there. And you're pointing out the holes. I appreciate
one could argue it's having an impact on the profitability in that industry too, because I mean, the cybersecurity insurance industry has sort of a crappy track record of making money in doing what they're doing, right? Yeah, like,
very true.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to understand too that last I looked, the median IQ for an insurance salesman was 97, right? But the median IQ of which is actually below average across
How
the
much?
U.S.
What's average?
I-
Let's say that a different way. You see how I
I
caught
don't-
myself in that? You see how I
Who
caught
did this
myself?
study? That's what I want to know.
That's a really safe. That's safe.
So like, I mean, you've got people
Average.
selling, like for all the MSPs watching this, right? You know, they're gonna have a client, they're gonna have cyber insurance, and the insurance guy, right? They're gonna get the question, "Hey, do I have coverage for ransomware?" What's the insurance guy say? Well, yeah, it's right here. It says it on the declarations page, right? Cyber extortion, ransomware, whatever the term of art is there. And it's like, well, yeah, that's true. But if you're just like slightly inquisitive about what you're trying to sell people to make a living, you'd know there's an OFAC exclusion, which means, hey, sometimes it's actually illegal to pay the ransom, right? And you're held to a legal standard called strict liability. So it's like, hey, insurance guy, just Google it, figure out what that means. It means even if you had no reason to know you're breaking the law, you're still going to be held liable. And then now there's going to be civil fines and penalties, which in the cyber policy says they're not going to insure that. So it's like, you know, if they would just go like at least one level down and just go, why is this? What's the caveat to this? How does this work? What's a widespread event? You know, I mean, it would make the world such a better place. And then it helps MSPs because now MSPs can go, hey, client, you know, you need multiple backups. You're going to need immutable backups, et cetera, et cetera. Here's why. Yes, you have a cyber policy. However, comma, you're going to have that OFAC exclusion. So if they just encrypt or delete all your backups, as we'll see here shortly in the $1 million MSP lawsuit, you know, if they get after your backups, you're going to have something, or effectively you could be toast. Right?
Well, that's a good teaser. That's a really good teaser, and I know you're excited, and I'm sure everybody's excited to hear. Matt, I think you might have some kind of lecture.
We have a lecture, but I'm just like
It's like we're halfway through a half marathon, and we're at the water table. We're gonna get a quick learning in.
Yeah.
Water back. If you don't,
Are you
mind
sure we
learning,
can't
maybe
spend the
now's a
next
good time to
45
tease.
minutes talking about air gapping backups? Because
Oh, it's a good
I
idea.
think I'd almost
right?
rather the damn lecture if I'm being honest.
All right. I'm jumping in, guys. We're gonna learn. We're gonna learn a little bit about selling cybersecurity
Joe, I love
services.
your logo, man. Love your logo. I think that's a good one.
My logo?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
nice.
I mean, I already know I love my logo. I'm not going to get on camera and say that with such emphasis, but I really love yours. I think that you've got the shield, you've got the element of the cyber, like as though it's a chip. I think it's really well done. It's subtle. It's cool. I like it.
Oh, here's the trick. I am obviously the nerd, right? I'm like the math, science, engineering, law guy. My wife has a bachelor's in art and a master's in fashion design. So I will wholly credit her for that, or it would literally just be my name and like, you know, Times New Roman 12-point font, black, white background.
That's funny.
I endorse the don't make your own logo stance. Me too. All right, you guys ready?
Let's do a lecture.
Let's do it.
Let's do a lecture.
So we're going to talk today about customers who say cyber is too expensive. So service provider says you need more security. Client says it's too expensive. You guys know that it's too expensive is a cop-out, right? This is like your client either doesn't want to think or...
Well, hold on, wait. Is most of the time a cop-out.
It's...
There are some fools out there, their pricing is whack.
Well,
there's like true. A small, you know, the bell
That's
curve.
true, but it's almost never the case that the client's even in position to understand what's expensive and what's not, right? Yeah. So when they answer you, it's too expensive. Now it might be that they can't afford it, right? But that wasn't a question of like, why is it priced this? That wasn't a question of what would be, you know, is there different versions of this? It's too expensive is your client trying to get out of that conversation in a way that you can't object to. Now, of course, if you've done some objection handling training, you can deal with that. We're going to do a little bit of that right now. But what your client's actually thinking, right, Many things, right? They're thinking many things, but these are some super common ones, right? Who do I trust with my security? Maybe not the guy who just showed them that number. They may not trust you, but they don't really want to say, "Hey Joe, I know you watch my kids, after the game on Saturday, but I just don't trust you with cyber," right? Like some of your clients who love you very much don't want to say that, right? And so they're going to say it's too expensive, so they don't have to say, "I don't trust you that you actually know how to satisfy my cyber regulatory needs," right?
Yep.
They may also be thinking, "Okay, great, this big expensive thing, but like, what security things do I actually need? Is this the thing I actually need? Like I know I need security, but like I'm looking at this number, I'm looking at this description. I have no idea. Like I'm a dentist office. Like, is that a dentist office thing? Right? And then the follow-up to that is like, okay, maybe it's the thing they need, but is it the size thing they need? The biggest version
Explain
of
what you
this
mean by size thing.
yeah, there's a really familiar version of this for MSPs, which is the firewall sale, right? Which I could rag on all day because I'm not a big
Do a
fan of
little
firewall
ragging,
sale.
man. You
All
got
right, all right.
edge. People like when you rag some.
We are post firewall, okay? Like
It's fair to
firewalls
use it as a juxtaposition, though.
firewalls do a lot of things, and some of those things are still useful, but like by and large, firewalls are not going to keep you safe from cyber. Like they are not going to keep you secure. Attackers have no problem hopping just about any firewall you can think of. So anyway, that's the ragging on firewall. But firewalls do accomplish some useful goals. They're from a product perspective, they're oftentimes a bundle sale. It's like, here's a bunch of features that have to do with security, and it's in an easy package that the customer understands because it comes in a box and has a price tag on it, right?
Explain why that's good.
Oh, well, it goes back to like the unveil, and I don't know, like there's different types of sales, but this goes back before cyber. I mean, you could think about like door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesmen that do the unveiling, and they show how beautiful the thing looks. And
there's that. I think there's also a digestibility and an understandability thing from good.
Particularly when it's a physical object you could hold in your hands, and the client's like, "You mean if I get that thing, I'm good? Yeah, I'll take one of those." When you tell them, "Hey, we need to audit XYZ, or we need to do this process on a regular basis," or like, these abstract things, it's hard for the client to like even understand, like, what are they buying? I can't even touch that thing. So the firewalls feels good. It's got a feel good effect, right? But firewalls come in different sizes. And then so you as the MSP, like, I mean, your firewall company may have 8 different sizes, but do you regularly quote 8 different sizes? And then your client's receiving this quote. They're like, "Hey, $4,000, that sounds like a lot. Isn't there a $2,000 version?" Right? So it's actually a thing the client's thinking frequently when they say it's too expensive is like, "I don't believe this is my size shirt," right? Because they have no context for it. And then, the last thing that comes up super frequently, which is MSPs have a hard time dealing with, right? Because your customer has a problem. They call you up, they have that problem, and then you're like, "Okay, I'll get back to you on Thursday." And then you get back to them. And like the reality is, yeah, they may have had a huge security problem on like Tuesday, but by Thursday, they're like worried about like, we're all out of cheese, right? Right, Zach? Like,
Dale's all out of pocket sand.
Yeah. I don't pocket sand.
Joe, did you get that reference?
Oh, I never fight without pocket sand.
There you go. All right. Nice.
So in any case, I just like pointing out that cyber's too expensive is just as like of a non-answer as you telling your client you need more security. Like that's not advice. So how do you combat that? I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger here. So I'm just gonna be quiet for a minute and see if this picture looks familiar to any of you.
It reminds me of the game of life. I just am dying to spin one of those little. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean you're moving through time here, and technologist is doing their job, the MSP is doing their job, the IT buyer, who's oftentimes not technical, is doing their job, and their job is to not pay too much. And technologists are like, oh man, like we need more security in this situation. You can tell the client, they say we can't afford it, and then lightning strikes, right? That incident happens. The client's pissed off at the service provider because wasn't it your job to stop this, right? Everything's on fire. Joe, you got to help me, right?
Joe, help him out.
Joe runs off. He gets his sword and shield. He's like, I'm on it. He comes up with an immense plan. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's an amazing plan. And then you come back with the plan, and the client says, I don't know if I can afford that, right? So a lot of this comes down to timing, right?
I've got a question for you, Matt. I know
Yeah.
you're going to talk more about this, and I'm interrupting you as you're beginning to talk about timing. But it kind of feels like the thing already burnt down.
Yeah, I mean,
Speak on that.
That's a big deal, right? Like, so the client like had this incident, right? And like the bad thing happened, and it was super scary. But then they woke up tomorrow, and the world didn't end. And then they woke up the next day, and the world still didn't end. And they're like, oh, maybe I'm good. I thought I needed to spend like 10 grand like on Tuesday, but like apparently I didn't, right? Now that may be a rational response or not, right? It's just a fact that like animals don't stay afraid, right? Like it's like, boo, I'm scared, right? And then like 5 minutes later, you're like not scared anymore, right? And that's what happens in these moments. And so, you know, the time for the cyber sale is not after an incident, although oftentimes that's when sales get done, right? The time for the cyber sale to start is before the incident, so that when the incident comes, the client can pull the trigger on the thing that was already shopped, right? All right, what do you got?
Why are they only able to pull the trigger after that point?
Well, some organizations are super great at this. There are some organizations that move strategically through time, and their budgeting processes are super quantitative, and everything's calculated. And that's not most companies.
My kind of people.
It's not most people. It's not most companies. Even large companies like aren't really very rational about spending. Usually,
I should never repeat that again. Is basically what I hear you telling me.
I mean, usually what happens is people are reactionary, right? They react. They experience a thing, and then they don't want that thing to happen again, or they experience a thing and they don't want it to be as bad, right? And when they're not spending on cybersecurity, they're hunkered down in a safe space. Like maybe there's some cyber risk across the street, right? Or out on the plains, but like basically they're fine. They're hunkered down, and they're not spending money. They're holding on to their money, which is another fear that they lose their money, right? But as soon as you risk the safety of that position where someone's hunkered down, right, and you're like, hey, that spot's not safe anymore, someone's gonna move. They're gonna move, right? And when they want to get up. When they want to get up and move, that's the time, you know, for the cyber sale. That's the time when they're really going to be able to, if they're educated, make a good investment decision. And I'm not talking about taking advantage of clients, right? I'm taking advantage of the moment in time where they can be rational, really, right? Where they're thinking hard about something that's important to them.
Well, and I think I want to touch on what you just said. So the idea that this moment they're thinking hard about the thing is important, because when we remove ourselves from the moment with the customer, it's like, well, we assume their knowledge is advancing because they are advancing through the world, and our worlds are very focused on this stuff. We're learning every day. We're running into new incidents every day, into new technology every day. But they actually aren't. It's wholly possible and likely that the only times they think about these things are when you're able to get in front of them to talk about it, when they have an issue, or when somebody around them has an issue, or some motivating thing happens. And the reason that I draw light to that is if they're only thinking critically at those moments, then they're only thinking critically at those moments. So if they know zero and you have, an hour of their attention where they're going to think critically about this to get them to 20% knowledge, that's great, but they may not be ready to purchase. And they may need to have a or B, another couple of conversations, or another incident, or another motivating thing to happen. So that attention point is really important. And you mentioned at the beginning of this, the onset, that some organizations are better in that moment being efficient with that time and communicating, here's what's going on and here's what you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, there are organizations that are at high maturity that are able to build organizational cognitive skills, like that the organizations can, in a group, make a rational choice, right? But it takes a high level of investment in group processing to do that. And it's slow. It's slow. You have to start way before you need it. You need to start. Organizations don't think as fast as people, right? You need to start the organizational think like 14 months before you need the answer, right? So enterprise risk management's been around a long time, and it dovetails with what Joe has experienced in the insurance world. But it's something that's hard. It's hard. Takes a lot of investment in effort all the time, right? And most people react. Most people say, "Oh, clearly I'm not safe where I'm sitting. I'm going to go move over there," and then they feel safe, right? So anyway, super familiar, I'm sure, to most listeners because it's just human, right? So I just want to talk really quick about the Fort Mesa Can't cyber sales method. So this is just objection handling for my customer says cyber's too expensive. One thing to note about this is if your customer says it's too expensive, you missed a beat. So let's talk about what you missed, right? You should be preparing the customer for sale. They need to be informed. If they're not educated on how to buy cyber, when you try to sell them cyber, they're not going to be ready to buy it. So first they need to trust you, right? The first thing you need to do is make sure your customer is ready to trust you from the perspective of cybersecurity investments. And if you're a technology provider and all you've done is fix their laptops or connected them to cloud email, and you have never had a conversation about cyber compliance and all the different types of things they could buy, when it comes to make that investment, they're not going to necessarily trust that you're the default advisor on that. If you've never talked to them about that stuff and or you don't talk to them about it on a regular basis, they're going to find someone they think has those conversations on a regular basis. Right?
What do you mean by that? Find someone? Because in
They're
my
gonna
mind, as an MSP, I'm like, well, obviously it's me.
Yeah, and the MSP may get the call because you're one of a few people they're going to call. But most small business owners, they also have an accountant, and they trust the accountant when it comes to money stuff, either spending money or like the reality is most business owners are afraid of losing money, like that the money's going to get stolen out of their accounts, invoices are going to be redirected. They're very scared about that, and those may be cyber threats, right? But accountants very frequently get the call. And in fact, one of the most popular cybersecurity assessments in our industry, the SOC 2, is exclusively delivered by accountants. And so if you're a small business owner, like, yeah, you're going to go to accountants. And the other person you might talk to is your lawyer, right? Yeah. Of course, people are worried about the legal.
Everybody loves a lawyer. Everybody's dying to talk to those guys.
No one loves lawyers, I don't think, except for maybe lawyers' wives. But I think
no, they don't. No, they get divorced too much.
But we trust lawyers, right? We trust lawyers to be lawyers.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We definitely trust them to be lawyers.
So yeah, I mean, like if you're worried about getting sued in a cyber incident, like the first call, right, is your lawyer, right? And then who do you call next? Your insurer, right? Maybe call your insurer first.
I would say that I get a lot of phone calls from not my MSPs, but my pure cyber insurance clients. And I think the reason they're calling me is they go, it's either one of two things. Like they've already made up their mind. They just want someone to validate that they're going to purchase the control. Or I think the MSP hasn't done a good enough job educating their client. Right. And I think it's very much incumbent, both for risk management purposes and liability purposes, as well as, just being a good business, to educate the clients on the risks, right? So that way, if the first time you go to a client, you're saying like, hey, I haven't spoken to you in about 2 years, but I need you to buy this thing. It's probably going to go over, like a fart in church. But if you've been
So it's going to
advising
be
them,
a big laugh.
yeah, huge laugh. But if you've been advising them about the risk this whole time, right? It's not so much a sales process as a educational process, and then saying, hey, if you're worried about this risk, we have a viable solution for you. Let's talk about it. And I think that's a much easier way to go about things.
Yeah, and that speaks specifically to what I was going to talk about next, is the risk based choice. But just to tie up like the round one point here, your customer may not understand the thing you're trying to sell them, but if they understand that you understand it, and that you understand how it relates to regulatory requirements, you understand how it relates to risk, they're going to trust your advice, right?
Well,
They're
what does
not going
that
to.
mean?
Well, if they trust that you know how to pick a sexy, glossy vendor, and that you hand them a brochure and say, "Hey, look, it's got all these
All
cybery
this
features."
gloss.
Yeah, like they're gonna be like, I don't know what that means. But if you say, well, I see that you service courts, and you're supporting a court system, and you might want to be thinking about the requirements of CJIS, which we went over a few weeks ago, right? And you're talking about the cyber requirements of the criminal justice industry. Like if you're having that conversation with your client, they're going to say, oh, this person knows the requirements of my business, right?
Right.
So they don't need to understand the cyber thing. They need to understand that you understand their needs. So
Yeah. Yep. And in sales, we talk about value communication being the biggest piece of sales. Well, what's the value? If you're showing, hey, I know, like a lawyer, the reason you're excited to, give your lawyer money is because they know the stuff. You're not going to sit down and open that book. You're not going to know that stuff. You need them to know that stuff. And if you show that presence as the service provider, hey, I know this stuff, it carries that same weight, in
yeah.
my mind, at least.
So what Joe was speaking about was risk, right? Which is, and you really can't have this conversation unless Zach, like that's just happened, right? Unless they already trust you to even have the risk conversation, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to give them some choices, and they should be risk informed. So you tell the client, hey, look, this is how much risk you have right now. Okay. This is how much you'd have to pay to have this much risk, or this much risk. Other businesses like you usually choose this. Here's the price tags. Here's the amount of risk. Would you like to move off that rock you've been sitting on, right? And that's the type of conversation that your customer will respond to when you link the risk to the offer, right? And that's not going to move them off the rock. What's going to move them off the rock is when you've given them that choice before the lightning scared them off the rock, right? And then they're going to run in the right direction.
Yeah.
So
they'll know where to go.
They're going to know which direction to run, right? They're going to say, I'm going to call Joe because he offered me this thing last week, and it sounded like the thing I should be doing, but I wanted to go on vacation, but now I'm just thinking I want to keep my business, right?
Right.
So, and then like the last thing is the timing, right? Which we talked about earlier. If you haven't done round one and round two, right, before the timing, you may have missed your shot here, but the reality is people don't want to change. They don't want to make changes. Change is scary. Change costs effort. Change costs money. It costs attention.
It could be
right?
worse.
Yeah, it could be worse. It might not be better. People don't want to change unless they feel like they have to, right? So you have to recognize that there is a moment where someone's standing and they're going to choose a new place to sit, and you want to give them the direction. You want to remind them, hey, remember this decision from last week or last month or last quarter I offered to you to make, right?
And
at
we
that
can
time
make
you
it
decided,
again.
yeah, you decided at that point you're going to stay on your rock, and I said, good, let me know when you want to move.
Cool, no problem. No hard sell here.
Yeah, are you sure you still like that rock, right? So that's can't. Preparation based sales.
And with can't, Matt, you can.
should put that in the brochure. So let's make this a little gritty, though, just to talk about those things that move people off the rock, because I'm talking about lightning and rocks and like feel like, you know,
I feel like Thor's
in
gonna
the real
pop out
cyber forest, right? What moves people off the rock, right? It's I ran this survey. I asked the Cybersecurity Hub to run this survey, and they got 4,150 votes, and no one responded and said that really sexy brochure from Sentinel One convinced me that I should spend 100 grand or 50 grand or 10 grand, right?
They had a nice paper though. You see the paper?
Yeah. I love their website. Like, it's always like I just feel like I'm in a hacker movie when I go to their website. I just love the feeling.
There's value. There's value in that, you know. Not none.
So their marketing department's great. I love that. The what moves people are 2/3 of the time, unfortunately, they got scared. Something happened. Lightning struck. That's what moved them. That's what drove them to action. But other things happen, right? Due diligence, customer legal, or regulatory pressure. And if you peel open that other number, which is 2%, what you actually see is different versions of these other three. So people really don't spend more money because like the solution is really amazing.
I'm so sorry that I just interrupted you rudely and to say something useless, but I'm going to say it anyway. I love when stats breaks itself up into its own stats. It's just like, can we just have a three item pie chart? We don't have to make it look super complicated if it's not.
Yeah. I mean, so anyway, that's what moves people. So you gotta pitch before these things happen, right? And then you remind your buyer. So your marketing literature can do this. Your sales conversations can do this. Of course, the New York Times can do this, right? But if the New York Times is what's educating your clients on cyber requirements, they may not see you as the advisor.
Oh, do you want New York Times to do it?
I used to be a Times reader back before the paywall.
That's a safe answer.
I would also add too that I think one thing that MSPs would find useful is something I do, right? So when I'm talking to a client, let's say it's just purely a cyber insurance client, right? Not an MSP, MSSP, etc. I just go, hey, obviously you are the subject matter expert in what you do because this is what you do all day, every day. So to learn about your business so I can help you, I'm going to ask you what's probably going to appear to be like a bunch of very basic, stupid questions, but just bear with me. Right? So then you kind of have carte blanche to really start diving in, right? You can learn a lot about somebody's business, what their particular risks are, what their concerns are, etc. And then turn it around and go, hey, obviously you are amazing at, let's say, manufacturing these widgets, right? Very clear. So I do cyber, right? Is how an MSP could say it. And they're like, I do cybersecurity, right? And sysadmin, etc. So feel free to return the favor, right? Ask me questions that you think might sound kind of dumb. Don't worry about it. And then also leveraging that to go, because you said X, therefore my recommendation would be ABC, right? So because you said, hey, this, the machine you use to manufacture widgets is running on Windows 95 and it's ancient, right? But it costs, that's like a $50 million piece of equipment or whatever it would cost. You're like, well, there's these exclusions coming out on cyber policies for legacy hardware, software. So because of that, right, I think we should implement ABC controls, right? Privilege access management, whatever. So then you can start kind of tying everything together, and it's not so much this. I often see it's somewhat adversarial as far as conversations go. And when you're talking to C-suite people, obviously they don't want to look dumb. And the CEO's job is to know about all things all the time since the beginning of time.
I disagree. I think the CEO's job is to be able to effectively communicate with everybody, which means they just are going to always be learning because everything's always changing.
Oh, ideally,
I do agree, right? But I agree slightly differently.
Ideally, yes. there's a lot of CEOs that have become comfortable.
Yeah.
I think
And now
it's
the
fair
FTC
to
is
say.
coming after him. Oops.
So you were just talking about Zach loves talking about experts like being good at what they're good at, right? And you were just talking about like one expert talking about their expertise to another expert, about the things that they're not expert about, right? And we've got this topic of the day, which is like if there's a perfect example of experts not talking to each other about their own expertise. The irony in this case abounds. Should we dig in?
Irony is one of my favorite things, so we absolutely should.
I too am a fan of Alanis Morissette, Zach. So
Are you
let's do
big?
it.
Are you a big Letterkenny guy?
I love Letterkenny. That
Yeah.
is one of the greatest shows ever made.
Yeah.
To be
They
fair,
really nailed it. Yeah, they
And-
really did nail it.
these guys are killing it. It's so funny, and I think the
About
only reason it's
Shorzy?
dude, Shorzy, classic all-time
Yeah.
character. If that was an American show,
Yeah.
they'd be crushing it. But it's still Canadian. It's kind of hard to get. That's the only thing holding them back, really. But it's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Really good show.
I also love the Amish farmer family. I won't repeat their
yeah.
names.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
yes. Yeah, before we get some, content violation strike on your YouTube channel. But yeah.
Awesome.
So Joe, tell us. Do you want to lay out the? Should I lay out the landscape, or do you want to give it a try?
Oh, I could just jump on into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Here, let me share my screen real quick. All right, how's that looking? Looks nice.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Beautiful.
All right, so we're going to talk about the $1 million MSP lawsuit, and I think you guys are going to see really a comedy of errors that I think that every MSP can learn from. So, spoiler, I've had a lot of MSPs contact me after this video because they're just not doing what I would say would be like fundamental risk management, risk transference, et cetera, et cetera. So let's just go ahead and jump on into it. Now, I will say, there we go. Let's talk about what happened. Now, obviously, these are the allegations made by the plaintiff. So, yes, there is a lawsuit going on. But I think we can learn from what at least the other side is saying. Now, obviously, the other side's a big law firm. So they're going to put everything into the light of, woe to me, none of this is my fault, so forth and so on. But
The
MSPs
poor
have to
law
understand.
firm.
Yeah. So MSPs have to understand that, it's not good enough to just rely on a technical defense, right? Like, as technical people, we're obviously driven to technological answers. But what we're talking about now is more of like the human element. So you just got to be careful with what we wish things were and what they actually are in terms of reality. So this complaint was filed in February of 2024, but the actual ransomware event occurred in February of 2023. So you have a year-long gap there. Now there's kind of a deeper
Just
discussion.
a little gap year. Most
Yeah, a
people
little gap
take
year.
one. It's not a big
Was
deal.
there a deadline, Joe? Is that what happened? There was a 12-month deadline.
Yeah, there was probably some statute of limitations that fell into that. But now the actual hearing for this case, I think they have like a special magistrate who's doing something there, but that's not going down until November. So this guy's had this thing hanging over his head since February of 2023. A year later, maybe it's kind of losing prevalence in his memory. Then it gets hit with a lawsuit, and now he's got 10 months, 9 months to get all of his ducks in order. So not a fun experience. What do I mean by this? Ultimately, is MSPs have to get proactive about risk management, right? Because, imagine the stress these guys are under. Not a good time. Now, what actually happened? So obviously, server login connectivity issues. What does the law firm do? They reach out to their MSP. Pretty standard. So now the MSP goes, hey, this problem got resolved. But now this law firm says they're still having problems. So look, obviously in retrospect, we're, kind of doing the Monday morning quarterbacking here, but that should have been a flag to the MSP to go, okay, maybe there's something more here that's going wrong. Common allegation that we're going to see. MSP, this is straight from the complaint, did not provide further information regarding network issues or cybersecurity risks. So this goes back to what we were just talking about, which is you have to educate your client. We see this in just about every single claim against an MSP where they're going, hey, court, hey, jury, hey, judge, these guys are the subject matter experts. They never told me that ransomware existed or business email compromise could be a data breach or AI was dangerous, that I shouldn't put a bunch of, PII, et cetera, into it, which I'm not saying you have to get hyper technical, but what I am saying is that one of the videos I have called Get Smart, the recommendation I put in there is, hey, put out a newsletter, right? Or put out alerts or something, right? It's not just marketing. MSPs may have seen this from their own law firm. They may have seen it from their own accounting firm. And the whole reason they do that, they don't give a damn if you know anything about some change to some paragraph and whatever IRS circular, blah, blah, blah. The whole point of that is if a claim pops up over that issue, the CPA firm or the law firm goes, hey, we told them there was a problem. We offered to help. They didn't reach out. How are you going to hold us liable for that? Right? That's the entire purpose of it. So I'm saying, hey, MSPs, take what these other white collar firms have been doing for 30 years, adapt that to your own business practices because it's an advantage. It's tried and true, right? We know that it works. And I've actually seen it work in real time, as a matter of fact.
Well, and that's what the economy wants us to do, right? And I hate to say it so cut and dry, but the economy doesn't want the lovely folks in state, local, and federal government who may or may not be experts to be making those decisions. And I don't think the businesses want that, and I don't think the people who are going to have to deliver the services want that. So I mean, it's like it's a little bit of a hill to be walked up. But
you mean we want our IT professionals to act like professionals? That's what you're saying?
I don't even necessarily need them to act like professionals, but I at least need them to be able to hold the rope on the responsibility. They can still sling it, still like do whatever the IT thing is, like still be that, but then also like incorporate this little element into the fold. You don't have to be a fucking lawyer, no offense to the lawyer, but it's a personality, right? It's not necessarily a personality, but it's an element of a personality that takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort, and it doesn't have to be that, but it can carry that same respect and attention and weight in the relationship with the client because of the knowledge, and communicating the knowledge, to Matt's earlier point, is the important part more than the professionalism, in my opinion. I'm a professional non-professionalist.
Yeah, I mean, and let's imagine, client just refused to have, I'll give an easy example, MFA for email access, right? They just cannot be bothered because it's just too damn hard. Let's pretend they're a small dental office because they're easy to pick on, right? Now, ideally, the insurance guy in me would go, hey, you got to drop that client. That's just a nightmare waiting to happen. But I know that's not always feasible. So what we want is the MSP to go, hey, I warned these guys.
How to deal with you.
Yeah, I talked about this stuff for years. I told them this was a problem, right? It's in writing. We have records of all this, right? Every QBR, we were recommending it. They didn't do it. How are you supposed to hold me accountable for this, right? And that is actually very, very effective for attorneys. So continuing on here, what happened? Now, the MSP ultimately determines that the firm's system was breached, so they're using the B word, hit with black box.
Which is the word we're not supposed to use, right?
Yes, so never.
I heard you weren't supposed to use the C word.
Complete? Yeah, so if you're calling something a breach, that's a legal determination. So MSPs don't do that. Now the ransom demand was made, but guess what happens? They try to restore from backups. Those have been deleted because it looks like there was no 2FA on backups. Firm got forced to pay the ransom. And then you'll see here, even though the MSP was aware that their network was experiencing an attack, the plaintiff was concerned about the security of their data. The MSP failed to take steps to prevent the deletion of cloud-based backup of the law firm's data, which they had arranged with the vendor. So I have a whole video on this that folks can watch later. MSP liability considerations after a client cyber event.
Well, let's get the link and put it in the chat. I can do it on my, say it again for me.
I can put it right on the screen too.
Do that, please, because we want we want people to go, check your stuff out. Say the name again for me, please. And I guess
it's
just look at the screen I have.
Yeah, right there on screen.
There it is. Beautiful. Thank you.
So the big takeaway there is identify, contain, refrain.
I did the same
that video
thing,
will tell you why, right? If you see something, you have to say something. That's identify. Contain, you have really a de facto professional standard. And I'd say a moral obligation to try and contain that threat as much as possible if you see something. And then past that point, it's, hey, you're not an attorney. You're not necessarily a full-blown IR team, right? You're not providing forensics, which tie in very closely with legal to make those legal determinations. And so that video should help everybody listening here to kind of understand, okay, at what point is this somebody else's problem, right? The client already screwed up. We don't want the MSP to start voiding their own insurance policy. There's limitations to what they can do. But remember, your client may just think of you as like the all-knowing IT guy, and that could get you in trouble. All right, so just be careful how far you go there.
Good point.
Now, here's what they thought the MSP was doing. Everything.
What they said they thought the MSP was doing.
Yeah. They were like, these guys were supposed to be doing everything for us. I'm sure at, an all-time low bargain basement type rate, I'm sure. But what are these guys saying? Hey, they relied on this MSP for the cloud backups. And I guess the law firm's credit, they don't know what the cloud is. They don't realize it's just somebody else's computer, right? They just think, oh, it's the mythical cloud where everything is secure. The MSP allegedly didn't implement dual factor authentication, right? Failed to have at least some repository, i.e. immutable backups there. They didn't detect the network intrusion, failed to ensure the networks were sufficient, protected from intrusion, blah, 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 blah. Now, maybe we'll see.
What the hell were they doing?
Yeah, right. So maybe we're going to see in the court case a year from now where that MSP had seen my video a couple of years ago and was like, oh, well, I'm going to, at every QBR or TBR, whatever you call it, tell them, hey, you need dual factor on backups. You need immutable backups. These are the risks. This is how we can help you. But if I were a betting man, I'd presume they didn't do that because it was an oral contract between the two parties.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that one.
Yeah, which is, if any MSP is watching this, right? If you've just done oral contracts because you were a break fix shop and then you did MSP stuff and now you're more into like the cybersecurity side, or it's, outsourced MSSP that goes through your MSP, et cetera, you have to have a contract because now it's a mess. It's a giant mess. Nobody knows who's responsible for what, but it's he said, she said. And if you're an MSP relying on a technical defense, man, you're going to lose the plot, right? You're going to have a bunch of jury people that can just figured out how to tweet, and that's the extent of their tech knowledge, and you're going to get hosed. So,
my favorite. Just figured out how to tweet.
Yeah. So now the law firm wants, it's actually at least $1 million. They're still trying to determine, although I find this a dubious claim, they're still actually trying to determine what their overall loss was, right? Because, of course, they had to pay the ransom, right? They had to bring in forensics, negotiator, etc. So, MSPs, when you're looking at your MSA, right? Hopefully you have one. What's your limitation of liability clause? You have to run that by the general attorney in your state, right? Or wherever the venue of dispute, to get technical, is going to be. Now, why is that? Because some limitation of liability clauses might not be enforceable. So stop borrowing MSAs from your buddy on Reddit. That's a terrible idea. You can end up with a whole bunch of shit that's just completely unenforceable.
Or not even that, but like not even your buddy on Reddit, but like the stranger on Reddit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't know where he got that from. You don't know the validity.
He might have wrote some code into it. He might have wrote some bad policies in there to it and know who's using them.
I mean, the contracts can have a venue in there, right? You could say, like, we're going to do this by the rules of XYZ, right?
Yeah, but I've had MSPs come to me and I said, hey, let me just look at your MSA. And one that comes to mind, they were an MSP out of Idaho, and their venue of dispute was South Dakota. And I was like, why are you going to South Dakota to, work through a claim? And they were like, oh, sorry, I got this from my buddy. And I'm like, don't do that.
Oh, yeah, and they didn't update
Don't do
it,
that.
right?
That would have been quite the back and forth travel for you. Yeah, 2 years ago, I put out a whole video on limitation of liability clauses so that MSPs could start understanding, hey, why is this important? How viable are there? There's a lot of, I'll say, miscommunication out there around what you can actually do, what you can't do, how enforceable this stuff is. But generally, talk to your local legal counsel, right? But, limitations of liability are very common within contracts. So don't worry too much about it. Here, hey, man, contracts don't cost $1 million. This could very well put this MSP completely out of business, or at least
I'm sure that all four of those guys are amazing, but I know Brad, and I like Brad.
Brad's a cool guy.
Yeah, whoever you use. Yeah, I mean, I don't.
They're all awesome.
These guys all know MSP and they all know cyber, right? That's the point here.
Yes. That'll make you laugh, though. So if you like that, which I put a premium on that, and just charges for it.
And I would just remind everybody here, the general law firm down the street is generally wholly unequipped to actually write a viable MSA for MSPs. It's something where it's too technical, right? So your attorney down the street would do the same thing I would do, which is I hop on Westlaw, find the stock form, slap your name on it, charge you way too much, and send it out the door. That's not what you want. You need somebody that actually specializes in this. And hey, if you're going to be providing services to law firms, people with large troves of information, a ton of PII, PHI, PCI, etc., charge accordingly. I mean, I understand there's market pressures. Like, I get it. But I tell you what, whatever this guy got from that law firm over the years providing services, I doubt it's $1 million, right? So know your worth, charge accordingly. And then they also brought in the backup vendor. Now, what can we read between the lines here? We can read between the lines here, and real briefly, it's, hey, I don't think the law firm had cyber insurance. I think it's highly questionable on if the MSP had the appropriate tech E&O insurance policies. So they're trying to wrap Acronis into this, maybe just to try and get some extra deep pockets in there to try and put the screws to these folks. So you could read what Acronis said there, credentials accessed outside the system, et cetera, et cetera. So to wrap it all up here, learning points, make sure you have the correct tech E&O policy. Contractually require your clients to carry cyber insurance. My video, Get Smart Defense in Depth, right? And you can just see right here. It's all free for you guys. It's on my YouTube channel. Just YouTube my name, right? It's not like I'm hiding anything. I don't have secrets. I'm just trying to help the community there. So
you have a couple of secrets.
Ooh. I really love you. I really love UFOs and conspiracy theories. That's probably.
I also have that secret.
I'm generally a pretty pretty boring person. But with that, I will stop. But hopefully that is helpful to all the MSPs watching.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing. Take a moment to give like a like a high level about you and how you could be supportive and maybe a takeaway. And then Matt will do the same, and then I'll maybe see if I could crack a joke, and we'll take ourselves to the weekend.
Yeah, so I'm just the insurance guy for MSPs. I just do all this other stuff because I love working with you folks. So just YouTube my name. You could, internet search my name. You'll find my free stuff all over the place. If you got any questions, give me a holler. My contact info is everywhere, much to my chagrin, because I keep getting calls from every cybersecurity vendor under the sun. So yeah, everybody can find me, and I hope that helped.
We went to email, man. I can't believe we could have just called you. Matt. I got the joke in. Okay, Matt, go ahead.
Does anyone answer the phone? Joe does. So I think like the biggest takeaway here that I just want to point back to, there are lawyers that know our industry, right?
Yeah.
And you can go to them and they're going to help you out, and they're going to be fast, and they're going to be relatively cheap, and they're going to save you from pain. And there's the few that Joe put on the screen, but there's a handful of other guys that specialize in our market segment. Go work with one of them. And I've had a chance to speak to a couple of those guys, just make your lives easier, guys. Just go get those contracts. They're actually going to help you. When your client sees a solid contract, you know what they think? They think, I can trust this guy. So
professional.
That's my takeaway.
Be that kind of professional. Oh, I trust this person's knowledgeable. Oh, I trust their operation is smooth. That's the kind of professional people I actually care about. Slip a bad word in if you want to. That's okay. Well, I hope everybody has a fucking great weekend. Thank you for coming to the MSP Cyber Roundtable. Joe, thanks for stopping by. Next week, we're going to have Barbara from CDN Technologies. She's their CEO. We're going to be talking about building lasting and meaningful communities, which is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I actually have started that process in Toledo. I've recently got involved with a bunch of neat local groups, and I'm sure she and I will ping pong those thoughts back and forth a little bit, and that'll be a great conversation. I know she leads a number of peer groups as well, and we'll dive into what makes a good peer group. And we'll also see if she will teach us how to pronounce her last name, of which I'm not going to give a go here because I am not confident at my execution, but I will be by the end of next week. Happy Friday, everybody, and enjoy the Memorial Day weekend. See ya.